Let's continue. Historical ironies continue. In Flanders, the captive serves Captain Diego de Urbina when news arrives about the league that His Holiness Pope Pius V, of happy memory, had formed with Venice and Spain against our common enemy, the Turk. The captive fought under His Most Serene Highness Don Juan of Austria at the Battle of Lepanto on October 7, 1571. Here is a second autobiographical detail. Urbina was Cervantes' captain at Lepanto. Note the captive's patriotic tone and commentary regarding this glorious victory. That day, which was so joyous for Christianity because it disabused all nations and the world of the error of believing that the Turks were invincible at sea. On that day, I say, when Ottoman pride and arrogance was finally broken, among the many fortunate men who were there, I alone was hapless. For rather than a naval crown, which I might have expected if we had been in Roman times, that night which followed that glorious day, I found myself with ball and chain about my hands and feet. Toward the end of the battle, the narrator had bad luck. I jumped into the opposing galley, which, breaking away from the one which had rammed it, hindered my soldiers from following me, and so I found myself alone among my enemies. The captive's personal tragedy ironically parallels that of Spain. Instead of winning a naval crown, the narrator is captured after Spain's most glorious battle against Ottoman pride and arrogance, a victory that revealed that the Turks were not invincible. But these historical events date the act of storytelling at our inn around 1588, that is, the year of the Battle of the Armada, when Spaniards suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the English, similar to their own against the Turks 17 years earlier. There's also an ironic echo of Don Quixote himself here, for Howard and Drake defeated the so-called Armada Invencible in the English Channel, known in Spanish as El Canal de la Mancha, a phonetic borrowing from the French manche due to its being a manga or sleeve of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, after Lepanto, the famous Muslim privateer made Ottoman admiral, whom Cervantes calls Uchali, took the narrator to Constantinople. The captive relates how an opportunity was lost to catch the entire Turkish fleet at port, adding that heaven ordered it otherwise as punishment for the sins of Christendom. He then reports on a skirmish the following year. La Loba, commanded by that thunderbolt of war, by that father of soldiers, by that happy and never vanquished Captain Don Álvaro de Bazán, the Marquis of Santa Cruz, captured La Presa, a galley whose captain was a son of that famous corsair Barbarossa. Notice how the captive emphasizes that the Christians won this battle precisely because La Presa's galley slaves rebelled. Barbarossa's son was so cruel and treated his slaves so badly that as soon as those who were at the oars saw that the galley La Loba was advancing and overtaking them, all at once they released their oars and seized their captain. The tactical moral here is don't abuse your galley slaves. But this hints at a more substantial point. Don Juan of Austria, the heroic Christian admiral at Lepanto, had promised all the galley slaves of his forces their freedom if they won the battle against the Turk. But in the end, even though the Christian armada was victorious, nobody was freed. The battle between La Loba and La Presa, then, allows Cervantes to indirectly criticize the hypocrisy of the Habsburgs at the Battle of Lepanto, especially that of Don Juan of Austria, the illegitimate brother of Philip II. Now the action moves to the central Mediterranean. The captive, who was at the oar without any hope of freedom, relates the fall of La Goleta, a Spanish fortress at the entrance of Tunis, which was taken by the Turks in 1574. Remarkable here is the captive's critical attitude regarding Philip II's military policy in North Africa. It seemed to many, and so it seemed to me, that heaven bestowed special grace and mercy on Spain by allowing the destruction of that office and stratum of wickedness, that devourer, sponge, and grub of countless money that was wasted there to no avail, and which served no other purpose than to preserve the memory of its capture by the invincible Charles V, as if those stones were necessary to make his fame eternal, as it already is and always will be. In other words, Cervantes says, let's bring an end to the pointless war against the Moors in North Africa. In the description of the fall of La Goleta, notice the constant wordplay Cervantes deploys with respect to the term caballero. On one hand, caballero means something as simple as soldier on horseback, dating from the time of Alexander the Great. Don't forget the high cost of maintaining a horse. For this reason, the animal has traditionally represented the economic and social prestige associated with the nobility. In medieval times, caballero comes to mean knight, signaling membership in a military order, such as the Knights of Malta. And like hidalgo, although of a much higher rank, caballero connotes some degree of lineage. Finally, caballero means gentleman and entails a certain sociable behavior. In all of these senses, considering Don Quixote's medieval military fantasy, as well as Don Fernando's transformation from a crude seducer into a true nobleman, caballero is arguably the key term of the first modern novel. Moreover, it relates to the ambiguous social status of the captive, who appears to be an hidalgo, though not the richest, and who also obtains military prestige, although he specifies that he only became an infantry captain. We should add that caballero carries another meaning related to military engineering. In the captive's tale, Cervantes also deploys caballero in the sense of a tower that usually forms part of a castle. To end the siege of La Goleta, however, the Turks mount an external tower. With many sandbags, they raised earthworks so high that they loomed above the fort's walls, and firing down on them, tirándoles a caballero, no one could maintain their position or help in the defense. Consider this detail. The particular caballero built by the Turks is an offensive structure. Moreover, this tactical problem, expressed here with precise terminology, is the same one that Don Quixote noted at the end of the previous chapter, where he expressed his anxiety about the impotence of the caballero when confronted by guns, which now allow a vile and cowardly arm to take the life of a valiant knight. Next, the captive mourns the death of one caballero in particular. Many notable men died in those two forts, one of which was Pagan Doria, a knight of the Order of St. John. Doria had tried to escape disguised in Moorish dress, but some Arabs cut off his head and brought it to the Turkish fleet commander. The Turks' reaction is to order that those who brought him the present be hanged, because they had not brought him to him alive. Recall that treachery was a key problem in the initial description of Don Quixote's madness. It will also be a problem throughout the captive's tale. Then the captive refers to a fictitious knight, Don Pedro de Aguilar, a native of Andalusia, although I know not which town. He adds that Aguilar was a poet. Hearing this, Fernando glances at his three comrades, and they all smile. They ask the captive what became of Don Pedro. Remember the tears of San Pedro cited by Lotario? During this brief exchange, in which the word caballero occurs 3 times, we learn that Aguilar escaped from slavery in Constantinople with the help of a Greek spy and returned to Andalusia, where he now lives safe, rich, and married with 3 children. The captive is relieved and highlights a key theme of Cervantes' novel. Thanks be to God, because in my opinion, there's no joy on earth that can compare to regaining one's lost liberty. What's the point here? On one hand, narrative fiction becomes almost indistinguishable from historical events. On the other hand, the captive's moral relates to Don Fernando, signaling Cervantes' deeper understanding of caballero as a matter of personal virtue instead of social status.